I was folding the last of the wedding linens when my phone buzzed. One glance at the screen, and my world shifted. Mom, I think it's best if you don't come to the wedding. We've arranged for you to watch it online instead. I hope you understand. My hands stilled. I didn't gasp or drop the tablecloth. Instead, a small smile spread across my lips. They thought they could erase me from the biggest day of my daughter's life with a single message. They thought I'd accept it quietly. Watch her marry into their polished, picture-perfect family from the safety of my living room. What they didn't know was that the mother they'd uninvited had built the very industry their wedding depended on. If Emily wanted me to watch online, I'd do exactly that, on my own terms. Before we jump in, let us know where you're tuning in from, and don't forget to subscribe too. When my phone vibrated against the polished oak table, it was a quiet, steady hum that cut through the peaceful afternoon like a warning bell. I wiped my hands on my apron, still wearing the faint scent of lavender polish, and picked up the phone, expecting to see a sweet note from Emily. Maybe a last-minute request for the rehearsal dinner, or a reminder about the favors I'd so carefully arranged for her wedding guests. Instead, my eyes landed on the message so short it seemed to carry an icy finality. Mom, I think it's best if you don't come to the wedding. We've arranged for you to watch it online instead. I hope you understand. I stared at the screen, blinking. The words seemed to rearrange themselves in my mind, as if I couldn't quite comprehend the meaning. Best if you don't come. Watch it online. Hope you understand. I didn't gasp or drop the phone. I didn't cry or call her in a fit of anger. Instead, I placed the phone gently on the table, smoothed the edges of the linen runner I'd ironed just that morning, and let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. A slow, deliberate calm settled over me like a cloak. Emily had always been headstrong, even as a child. I'd admired that in her once, the way she'd face down a playground bully or refuse to apologize for something she hadn't done. But this was different. This was cruelty dressed up as courtesy. As I stood there, the afternoon sun streaming through the lace curtains, memories came flooding back. Her first dance recital at age 6, when her tutu had fallen askew, and I'd rushed backstage to fix it. The time she'd come home in tears at 16, heartbroken over some boy whose name I couldn't even remember now. The countless nights I'd stayed up with her, helping her study for the SATs, editing her college essays, driving her to campus tours. And now, in the most important moment of her life, she had decided I didn't belong. She'd decided I was too much, too embarrassing, too something. My mind raced, searching for the reason. Had I overstepped? Had I made her feel I was taking over? Perhaps her fiancé's family had whispered poison into her ear. I'd met them once, smiling faces, polite words, but the way they'd looked at me, like I was some quaint relic from another time. Not the owner of Alexander Events, the woman whose hands had built weddings so grand they'd been featured in glossy magazines from coast to coast. I'd built my empire on elegance and discretion. 1,000 brides had walked down aisles designed by me, down-flowered canopies I'd arranged, to music I'd chosen, with lighting that would make even the simplest hall glow like a palace. And now, my own daughter had uninvited me from her wedding. I sat at the polished dining table, the smell of lemon oil mixing with the sharpness of betrayal. I could still hear Emily's voice in my head, her laughter, her sighs, her excited chatter about the dress fittings. I had offered to help plan. I'd offered to coordinate the entire event, free of charge. But she'd refused, insisting she wanted to do it herself, that she and Dylan, her fiancé, wanted something different. Different. I had accepted that. I'd smiled and stepped back, letting her make her own decisions. After all, it was her day. But now it seemed There was no room for me at all. I rose from the table and moved to the window, watching the breeze stir the rose bushes I'd planted years ago. The petals danced in the sun, fragile and strong all at once. I remembered planting them with Emily at my side, her small hands clutching the trowel, her face streaked with dirt and determination. I wondered if she remembered. A car pulled into the driveway, a sleek black sedan I didn't recognize. My heart jumped, foolishly hoping it was Emily come to explain, to apologize, to say it was all a mistake. But the car door opened, and a man in a crisp navy suit stepped out, carrying a small stack of papers. "Mrs. Alexander?" he asked, his voice polite but formal. "Yes," I replied, stepping onto the porch. He handed me an envelope. "From Ms. Emily Alexander," he said. I took it, my fingers trembling slightly. He nodded once and walked back to his car, leaving me standing there, holding what felt like the final nail in a coffin I hadn't even known was being built. Inside, I sat at the table once more, turning the envelope over in my hands. It was cream-colored, the expensive kind, with her name scrawled in that familiar script. I opened it slowly, unfolding the letter as if it might shatter in my hands. "Mom," it began. "I know this is hard to hear, but I think it's for the best. Dylan's family is very particular, and they don't think it's appropriate for you to be at the wedding. I tried to change their minds, but they were firm. I hope you can respect this. I promise we'll record the whole thing and send you the link. Love, Emily." I read it twice, each word etching itself deeper into my chest like a blade. I closed the letter, folding it neatly, and set it beside the polished silver I'd spent the morning preparing. My daughter's wedding. My daughter's wedding. If she wanted me to watch online, I would. But I'd make sure she never forgot that her mother was no ordinary woman. They wanted a show? I'd give them one. The night after Emily's letter arrived, I couldn't sleep. The house was too quiet, filled with the echo of her absence. Every shadow seemed to carry her voice, the small laugh she'd always given when she caught me singing along to the radio, the sharp tone she'd adopted in recent years when she felt I was interfering. I made my way to the kitchen, where the moonlight cast a cold glow across the marble counters. I had always loved this room, my sanctuary after long days orchestrating other people's fairy tales. But tonight, it felt like a stage set, waiting for a scene that would never come. I opened the cabinet and pulled out the teapot Emily had given me for my birthday 5 years ago. Blue and white porcelain, delicate as a promise. I remembered the day she'd handed it to me, her smile uncertain, as if she wasn't sure I'd like it. I'd pretended not to notice the price tag still stuck to the bottom, a last-minute purchase probably, but I'd loved it anyway. It was from her. That had been enough. Now, as I filled it with water and set it on the stove, I wondered what had changed. I thought back to the last time I'd seen her, 2 weeks ago, at the bridal boutique. She'd looked so radiant in that dress, even more beautiful than I'd imagined. I'd tried to hide my tears, not wanting to embarrass her. But she'd caught me, of course, and laughed. "Mom, it's just a dress," she'd said, her tone affectionate but exasperated. "You're too emotional." Maybe that's what had driven her away. My emotions. My inability to let go. I'd given her everything, but maybe what she'd really wanted was space. A clean break from the mother who'd always hovered too close. I sank into the kitchen chair, the cool wood pressing against my spine, and let the memories wash over me. I remembered the day I'd told her father I was pregnant. He'd smiled, his eyes crinkling at the corners the way they always had when he was genuinely happy. "A daughter," he'd said, his voice thick with emotion. "We'll name her Emily, after your grandmother." He'd died when Emily was 9. A heart attack, sudden and brutal. I'd held our daughter close as she cried, promising her that I'd always be there for her. I'd kept that promise, even when it meant sacrificing my own dreams. Every business trip cut short, every late night at the office balanced by a breakfast with her before school. And now, this. A wedding I wasn't invited to. The kettle whistled, breaking my reverie. I poured the water over the tea bag, watching as the liquid darkened. The aroma of chamomile rose around me, comforting and familiar. My phone buzzed again on the table. I reached for it, half expecting another blow, but it was only a message from Denise, my oldest friend, and the one person who had always stood by me through every storm. "Grace, I just heard. Are you okay? Let me come over." I hesitated, my fingers hovering over the screen. I didn't want pity. I didn't want to be the woman whose daughter had banished her to the sidelines of her own life. "I'm fine," I typed back. "Thank you. Let's talk tomorrow." I set the phone aside and wrapped both hands around the teacup. The warmth seeped into my fingers, but it couldn't touch the cold inside me. What had I done to deserve this? The question pulsed in my mind, relentless and sharp. I thought about Dylan's family, the Prentices, old money, the kind that wore its privilege like an invisible crown. I'd met his mother once, at Emily's engagement party. She'd worn a navy dress that probably cost more than my entire outfit, and her smile had been as cold as her diamond necklace. "It's so lovely that you can make time for Emily," she'd said, her voice dripping with condescension. "I know weddings are so stressful for working women." Working women. As if I were a servant in my own daughter's life. I'd smiled politely, biting back the words I wanted to say. That I'd built Alexander Events from the ground up. That my company had organized galas for senators, CEOs, and celebrities. People who'd trust me with their most intimate moments. That my net worth was larger than hers would ever be. But I hadn't said any of that. I'd kept quiet, for Emily's sake. Now, I wondered if my silence had been a mistake. I rose from the table and carried my tea to the window. Outside, the garden glowed silver under the moonlight. The roses Emily and I had planted years ago were still there, their blooms heavy with dew. She'd once told me she wanted her wedding to feel like those roses, delicate but strong, a symbol of resilience. I wondered if she remembered that now. A part of me wanted to call her, to beg for an explanation, for a chance to fix whatever had gone wrong. But another part of me, the part that had built my business, that had raised a child alone, that had survived loss and grief, knew that some wounds couldn't be mended with a phone call. If Emily wanted to cut me out of her life, I would let her. But I would not let her forget who I was. I would watch her wedding, just as she asked. But she would learn that some mothers don't fade quietly into the background. She would learn that some mothers are made of steel. The next morning dawned heavy with clouds, a grayness that matched the ache in my chest. I'd slept in fits and starts, waking each time with the taste of Emily's message on my tongue, like bitterness I couldn't swallow. I moved through the house on autopilot, setting the kettle to boil, folding the linen napkins I'd once intended for Emily's rehearsal dinner. Everywhere I looked, there were echoes of her. The framed photograph of her at 6 years old, beaming from a stage in a flowered dress. The ceramic plate she'd made for me in 2nd grade, its lumpy edges painted with the words, "Best Mom Ever." I traced my fingers over the letters, wondering when that sentiment had become so fragile it could be erased with a single text. Denise called at 9, her voice low and cautious. "Grace? I know you said you didn't want company, but I'm outside. I brought coffee and that cinnamon swirl you love." For a moment, I considered telling her to go home. But then I caught sight of my reflection in the hall mirror, hair unbrushed, eyes ringed with shadows, and realized how hollow I looked. Denise had known me for more than 30 years. She'd seen every version of me, from the 20-year-old bride to the powerhouse event planner to the grieving widow. She'd earned the right to see me like this, too. "Come in," I said, opening the door. She stepped inside, a gust of damp air following her. She carried a pink bakery box in one hand and a paper cup carrier in the other. "I hope I didn't overstep," she said, setting them down on the kitchen counter. "But when I heard what Emily did, I couldn't just sit at home." I shook my head. "You didn't overstep. My voice trailed off. I was so tired of holding everything together. Denise poured the coffee and handed me a cup. "Talk to me," she urged. I took a sip, letting the warmth seep into my bones. "She doesn't want me at her wedding," I said finally. "She says it's Dylan's family's idea, but she didn't fight them. She just accepted it." Denise's eyes darkened. "After everything you've done for her, how could she treat you like this?" I shrugged, but my shoulders felt like lead. Maybe I smothered her. Maybe I made everything about me. "Grace, don't you dare," she snapped, her voice sharp as a blade. "You've given that girl everything, your time, your money, your heart. If anyone deserves to be at that wedding, it's you." Her anger gave me a flicker of strength. I set my cup down and leaned against the counter. "She told me to watch it online," I said bitterly. "Like a spectator at a show." Denise's mouth tightened. "Well, maybe that's exactly what you should do, but on your terms." I frowned. "What do you mean?" She leaned closer. "You're Grace Alexander. You've built weddings that made grown men weep. You have contacts, influence, resources. If Emily thinks she can sideline you, she's in for a surprise." A slow smile curved my lips. "You're suggesting what? Crash the wedding?" "Not crash," Denise corrected. "Make a statement. Remind her who taught her how to dream big in the first place." I considered that, rolling the idea around in my mind like a marble. My heart beat faster. Denise's eyes glinted. "You've always been the queen of elegant revenge. Remember when that socialite tried to stiff you on the invoice after her gala, and you sent her flowers every day for a month, with the invoice attached?" I laughed softly, remembering the look on that woman's face. "She paid in full, plus a tip," I recalled. "Exactly," Denise said. "So don't hide in the shadows now. Use what you know, who you are, to make a point." The embers of resolve sparked to life inside me. I thought of Dylan's mother, with her cold smile and her perfectly manicured hands. I thought of Emily, eyes wide and bright in that bridal boutique, so certain of the world she was about to join. They wanted to erase me from that day, but I wasn't so easily erased. I set my cup down with a decisive thud. "You're right," I said, my voice firm. "I'm not going to sit in front of my laptop, watching my daughter get married like a stranger. If Emily wants me to watch it online, fine, I'll watch, but I'll make sure she knows exactly who she's excluding." Denise grinned. "That's the Grace I know." Over the next hour, the plan began to take shape. I would attend the wedding, digitally, as Emily had so graciously suggested, but I would do it my way. Alexander Events had an entire department devoted to live streaming for overseas guests. I'd designed weddings with screens so seamless you'd swear the viewer was sitting in the front row. I would call in every favor I'd earned, every connection I'd nurtured, every ounce of influence I'd built. And I would make sure Emily, and the Prentices, would never forget who taught her the meaning of grace, elegance, and power. By noon, I'd made the calls. My staff, loyal to the core, sprang into action. Within hours, a plan was in place to orchestrate a viewing event unlike anything Emily had imagined. Denise stayed by my side, helping me sort through guest lists and vendors. "You're sure you want to go through with this?" she asked. "Once you start, there's no going back." I looked at her, my eyes clear and unwavering. "She asked me to watch," I said. "So I'll watch. But I'll make sure she knows the value of a mother's love and the cost of her betrayal." As the sun began to set, I felt the old spark of confidence ignite inside me. For years, I'd built dreams for other people. Now, I was building one for myself. A dream that would remind Emily of the woman who had always stood in the shadows, lifting her higher, making her shine. They thought they could cast me aside. They were about to learn that some women don't fade quietly into the background. Some women light up the sky and refuse to be ignored. The morning sun filtered through the kitchen windows, catching motes of dust that danced like tiny golden fairies in the air. I stood at the counter, the smell of coffee rich and comforting, but my hands trembled as I reached for the mug. Sleep had eluded me again last night. Instead, I'd lain awake, replaying every moment of Emily's childhood, every scraped knee, every triumph, every heartbreak, wondering where I'd gone wrong. Denise had left the night before with a hug that had felt like a lifeline. "You've got this, Grace," she'd whispered fiercely. "Show them who you are." Her words echoed in my mind now, blending with the slow, methodical beat of my heart. The house was quiet, too quiet. The stillness felt oppressive, as if even the walls were holding their breath, waiting for the storm that was coming. I carried my coffee to the living room and sank into the armchair by the window, the one with the faded floral upholstery that Emily had always teased me about. She'd grown up in this house, learned to walk on these hardwood floors, scribbled her name in the corner of the hallway with a pink crayon that had taken me days to scrub out. I'd left the faintest trace behind, a secret reminder of her. I closed my eyes and let the memories rush in. Her first day of kindergarten, when she'd clutched my hand so tightly, I'd thought I'd never get the feeling back in my fingers. Her high school graduation, where I'd sat in the front row, beaming as she'd crossed the stage, the tassel swaying like a golden promise. I'd been there for all of it, every milestone, every heartbreak. And now, for the biggest day of her life, I was to be nothing more than an afterthought, an online viewer in my own daughter's story. The injustice of it burned like acid in my chest. But beneath the pain, a steely resolve had begun to harden. I set the coffee down and reached for my laptop. I'd spent decades building Alexander events into the gold standard of luxury wedding planning. My name opened doors, secured venues, charmed even the most jaded socialites. I'd done it all with a smile, with grace, never letting them see the grit it took to rise to the top. Now, I would use every ounce of that influence to craft a response that Emily and the Prentices would never forget. My fingers flew over the keyboard, sending emails to vendors, suppliers, colleagues who owed me favors. I didn't need their pity. I needed their expertise. I outlined the plan I'd devised with Denise, a private viewing event, live-streamed directly from the wedding, but with my own subtle enhancements. I'd make sure every angle was perfect, every sound clear, every detail visible. I'd set up my own small gathering, a few trusted friends, some colleagues who'd helped shape Alexander Events into the powerhouse it was. And I'd watch, with dignity, from my own carefully curated stage. If Emily wanted me to watch from afar, I'd do so with style. By noon, confirmations flooded in. The caterer I'd once saved from a disastrous gala agreed to supply canapés. The floral designer whose entire business I'd built with one influential introduction offered to create an arrangement in my favorite hues. Even my tech team, loyal to the core, promised to set up the live feed, ensuring it would be broadcast seamlessly. I sat back, my heart pounding with a strange mix of grief and determination. I wasn't crashing her wedding. I was taking back my dignity. I would show her, and her new family, that I was no mere footnote in her story. The phone rang, and I hesitated before answering. For a wild second, I thought it might be Emily, calling to apologize, to say she'd changed her mind. But when I saw the name on the screen, my hope crumbled. It was Dylan's mother. I pressed the green button and steadied my voice. "This is Grace." Her voice was as smooth and cold as the pearls she always wore. "Mrs. Alexander, I trust you received the arrangements Emily shared regarding the wedding attendance." My jaw tightened. "I did." She sighed, the sound dripping with manufactured regret. "I hope you understand it's in everyone's best interest. Emily is very sensitive to conflict. We didn't want any undue stress on her special day." Undue stress. As if my presence was a threat, a stain on her perfect tableau. "I see," I said, my tone even. "There's no need for drama," she continued, her voice condescending. "I know this is difficult, but it's really for the best." I let the silence stretch, letting her fill it with her own discomfort. "Thank you for your concern," I said finally. "But I assure you, I know exactly how to conduct myself." She paused, perhaps realizing I wasn't the shrinking violet she'd hoped I'd be. "Well, good," she said. "We'll see you on the live stream." She ended the call without a goodbye. I set the phone down, my fingers trembling. For a moment, doubt crept in. Was I being petty? Should I simply accept the situation and let Emily have her day? But then I thought of the way Dylan's mother had spoken to me, as if I were an inconvenience, an embarrassment to be managed and kept at arm's length. I rose from the chair, my spine straight. I had spent a lifetime teaching Emily how to stand tall, how to chase her dreams, how to build something from nothing. I had taught her to be fearless, to know her worth. Now, I would remind her who had taught her those lessons. That night, as the house settled into silence, I stood at the window and looked out at the garden. The roses I'd planted with Emily still bloomed, their petals soft and vibrant. They'd survived storms, droughts, even the occasional careless gardener. Just like me. I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of the past and the uncertainty of the future pressing down on me. But I would not bow. Emily wanted me to watch from a distance. So I would. But I would do it on my terms. I would do it with grace. The morning of Emily's wedding arrived with a sky so clear it seemed almost cruel. I had always imagined waking up on this day to a flurry of activity. Curling irons heating in the bathroom, last-minute adjustments to bouquets, a house filled with laughter and the chaos that only family brings. Instead, the house was quiet, every room a hollow reminder of the place I'd once held in her life. The arrangements I'd made for my private viewing event were all in place, the best caterer in the city having delivered delicate canapés and an array of small desserts that would have made any wedding guest envious. The floral designer had outdone herself, filling the living room with blush peonies and white roses, a palette I'd chosen carefully, a quiet nod to the colors Emily had always loved. It was all perfect. And yet, as I stood there with a glass of water trembling in my hand, I felt anything but. Denise arrived just after 10, dressed in a soft pink dress and carrying a bottle of sparkling cider. "Non-alcoholic, since you said you wanted to stay clear-headed," she said with a wry smile. I tried to laugh, but the sound caught in my throat. "Thank you," I said, my voice thin. She took my hand and squeezed it. "Grace, you don't have to watch if you don't want to." I pulled my hand back gently. "I need to see it," I said. "Not because I want to, but because I have to." Denise nodded, understanding. She'd always understood. We settled into the living room, the large screen arranged by my staff glowing softly, a quiet promise of the images to come. The tech team had outdone themselves. Multiple camera angles, live feed overlays, everything arranged with the kind of seamless precision I'd insisted on for my own clients. And yet, as the feed went live and the image sharpened, it hit me all over again that I was a guest at my own daughter's wedding, an outsider looking in. The camera panned across the venue, an elegant estate just outside the city. I recognized the gardens. I'd recommended that location to a client once, back when Emily still called me every day for advice. Now it was Emily's backdrop, the place she'd chosen to marry into a new life that apparently had no room for me. Guests were arriving, laughter and chatter filling the air. I spotted Dylan's mother, resplendent in navy satin, her diamonds catching the light like tiny stars. She wore her satisfaction like a crown. Denise caught my gaze and shook her head. "She has no idea what she's missing," she muttered. I tried to smile, but it faltered. "Maybe," I whispered. "Or maybe this is exactly what she wanted." The officiant appeared on screen, standing beneath a delicate arch of roses and wisteria. A hush fell over the crowd, and I leaned forward, my breath catching. Then Emily emerged, radiant in a lace gown that shimmered in the morning light. Her hair was swept into an elegant chignon, a style I'd taught her to do when she was 16. She clutched a bouquet of white roses, my favorite, I realized, and for a moment, a bittersweet pride swelled in my chest. She was so beautiful, and she was so far away. The camera zoomed in as she reached the altar, her eyes fixed on Dylan. The joy in her expression, raw, unfiltered, hit me like a punch. That was my little girl, the one who used to climb into my bed after nightmares, the one who'd made me promise I'd never leave her. Denise's hand found mine. "Grace," she whispered. I swallowed hard, forcing the tears back. "I'm okay," I lied. The ceremony began, the words of love and commitment floating over the speakers. I watched as Emily repeated the vows I'd once dreamed she'd say in front of me, her voice strong and steady. When the officiant asked if anyone objected, my heart stuttered, irrational hope surging. But of course, the room remained silent. There was no one to object. Not me. Not the mother who'd given her everything, and now sat alone in a room full of strangers. When they were pronounced husband and wife, the crowd erupted in applause. I clapped too, the sound small and hollow in the large, empty room. The camera shifted to Emily and Dylan's first kiss as a married couple, and I felt the finality of it. The closing of a door I hadn't even known was open. Denise handed me a tissue. "Grace, I'm so sorry," she whispered. I shook my head, unable to find the words. The feed continued, showing the couple's slow walk down the aisle, their faces radiant. Guests leaned in, hugging them, pressing congratulations into their hands. I saw Dylan's mother step forward, her arms open, her face a mask of maternal pride. But I didn't see myself. I wasn't there to fix Emily's train when it caught on a loose stone. I wasn't there to press a kiss to her cheek, to whisper how proud I was. I wasn't there to remind her that she came from strength, from love, from a mother who had always fought for her. The final image on the screen was of Emily's back, her veil billowing like a white flag in the breeze as she disappeared into a new life that didn't include me. The feed ended. The room fell silent. Denise reached for my hand again, but I pulled it away. "I'm fine," I said, my voice flat. She didn't argue. I stood, smoothing my dress, every inch of me trembling with a rage I hadn't known I was capable of feeling. If she thought this was over, she was wrong. She might have cut me from her wedding day, but she couldn't erase me from her life. I was her mother, and she was about to learn that a mother's love and her wrath are not so easily dismissed. The day after Emily's wedding dawned heavy and gray, like the sky itself was still mourning my absence. I wandered through the house in a daze, every room echoing with the ghosts of what should have been. Flowers waiting to be arranged, boxes of candles I'd ordered months ago for her wedding shower, piles of unused place cards with her name embossed in gold. The ache inside me had settled into something harder now, something more dangerous. Betrayal was a poison I'd tasted before in business deals gone sour, in friends who'd turned out to be rivals. But nothing compared to the sting of my own child turning away from me, cutting me out as if I'd never existed. I'd tried to tell myself it was the Prentices who'd pushed for it, that Dylan's mother and her cold smile were to blame. But deep down, I knew Emily had made her own choice. She'd chosen their approval over her mother's presence. Denise called mid-morning, her voice careful. "How are you holding up?" I leaned against the kitchen counter, staring at the cold, untouched coffee pot. "I'm not," I said bluntly. "It feels like I've been erased." "You haven't been erased," she said gently. "You're still her mother, Grace. That's a bond she can't break, no matter what she does." "Maybe," I murmured, "but she's certainly trying." Denise hesitated, then said, "Listen, I've been hearing things. Whispers. People are talking." My pulse quickened. "What people?" "Vendors, mostly. Some of the guests. I have friends who were there, you know. They said it was beautiful, but cold. That Emily looked nervous, distracted. And Dylan's mother, well, she was playing Queen Bee all night. She practically ran the whole event." I closed my eyes, the image of that woman's smug smile igniting a spark of anger deep inside me. "Of course she did," I said bitterly. "She's been planning this for months." Denise's voice dropped. "But here's the thing, Grace. People noticed. The staff, the guests. Everyone saw the tension. Some even said they overheard things about you." I straightened. "What kind of things?" "That you were difficult. That you didn't approve of Dylan. That you'd tried to interfere in the wedding plans and had to be kept away for the sake of harmony." My breath caught. "That's a lie," I whispered. "I know it is," Denise said fiercely. "But it's out there now, Grace. People are whispering, and you know how fast gossip travels in this town." I felt a sharp pain in my chest, a mixture of rage and sorrow. So now I'm the villain, the mother who couldn't let go. Denise was silent for a long moment. "What are you going to do?" I turned from the counter and walked to the window, staring out at the roses Emily and I had planted so long ago. The blooms were wilting now, the petals dropping like tears. "I'm going to remind them who I am," I said finally, my voice steady. "I'm going to remind Emily, and everyone else, that I built this business, this reputation, this life from nothing, and no one, certainly not Dylan's mother, gets to rewrite my story." Denise let out a breath that sounded like relief. "Good," she said. "That's the Grace I know." After we hung up, I sat down at my writing desk, the old mahogany surface worn smooth by years of late-night brainstorming sessions. I pulled out a notepad and began to list names. Every florist, caterer, photographer, and planner I'd ever worked with. Every vendor whose business I'd saved. Every contact I'd made over decades of building Alexander Events into the empire it was. They owed me, every one of them, and they would help me now. My mind churned as I formulated a plan. I wouldn't confront Emily directly, not yet. That would be too easy for her to dismiss, to frame as a mother's bitterness. Instead, I would show her, show them all, exactly who they'd tried to cut out. I would organize the most exquisite gala this town had ever seen, an event so breathtaking that even the Prentices couldn't ignore it. And I would do it in Emily's name. An event to celebrate family, tradition, and loyalty. The very values they claimed to cherish, but had so conveniently forgotten when it came to me. I would donate every penny of the proceeds to a cause close to Emily's heart. Perhaps the children's literacy program she'd once volunteered for, back when she still cared about things that didn't come with a trust fund attached. It would be a gesture too public, too generous, too elegant to be dismissed as petty revenge. But beneath the sweetness would lie a razor's edge, a reminder that I hadn't vanished, that I couldn't be erased from this family's narrative. As I planned, a sense of purpose settled over me like a balm. My hands stopped trembling. My heart steadied. By late afternoon, I had the outline of the event. A black tie gala at the old Whitmore estate, the most coveted venue in town. I'd call in every favor, every connection, every bit of influence I'd built over the years. And when the town's elite walked through those doors, they'd see my name on every invitation, every program, every donation pledge. Grace Alexander, mother of the bride. I picked up the phone and began to dial, my voice calm and warm as I reactivated relationships that had lain dormant since Emily's engagement. Each call reaffirmed what I already knew. I was still respected. I was still powerful. And no one could take that away from me. As the sun set and the first stars appeared, I allowed myself to imagine Emily's face when she heard about the gala. I pictured her pride battling with her guilt, her confusion as she realized that the mother she'd cast aside was not so easily dismissed. I closed my eyes and smiled. This wasn't about revenge. It was about respect. About reminding my daughter and the world that a mother's love is fierce, unyielding, and impossible to erase. Let them whisper. I'd give them something to talk about. The next morning dawned with a brittle chill that seeped through the cracks in the old windows and settled in my bones. I stood at the kitchen counter, staring at the list of names I'd scrawled the night before, each one a thread I could pull to unravel the neat tapestry Emily and Dylan's family had so carefully woven. The phone rang just after 8, the sound slicing through the silence. I let it ring twice before answering, a practiced calm in my voice. Grace Alexander, I said. A familiar voice greeted me, warm but tinged with uncertainty. Grace, it's Daniel Green from Whitmore Estate. I just wanted to follow up on your message about the gala. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. Daniel, thank you for calling back. I know it's short notice, but I'd like to reserve the estate for a black tie charity gala. It's a cause very dear to my daughter's heart. There was a pause on the line, and I could almost hear Daniel shuffling papers, considering. Of course, Grace. We'd be honored to host you again. You've always brought us the most beautiful events. When were you thinking? I let a small, satisfied smile spread across my lips. 2 weeks from Saturday, I said. I know it's tight, but I'm confident we can make it work. Daniel's tone brightened, that old eagerness to please that had always made him one of my favorite partners. For you, Grace, anything. I'll hold the date. I thanked him, and as I hung up, I felt the first real surge of momentum. The calls came in quick succession after that. Caterers, florists, photographers, all of them eager to lend their expertise. Some of them were newer contacts, people who owed me small favors, but others were long-standing colleagues who remembered the quiet acts of kindness I'd extended over the years. I'd always believed in building relationships, not just transactions. That belief was paying dividends now. By noon, the event was more than a concept. It was a reality, a living thing that grew with every confirmation and every yes. Denise arrived with lunch, a box of salads and her steady presence. She set it on the counter and regarded me with that sharp, assessing gaze of hers. You look like a woman on a mission, she said, folding her arms. I gestured to the stack of notes beside me. It's happening, I said simply, I'm calling it the Garden of Light Gala. All proceeds to benefit the Children's Literacy Fund Emily used to volunteer with. We'll decorate the entire estate in white roses, her favorite. I want every detail to reflect who she is, who she used to be. Denise's brow furrowed. Are you sure, Grace? This is a huge undertaking, and it's close to the wedding. I met her eyes, the steel in my spine firming. That's exactly why. I want her to see that I'm still here, that I'm still the mother who raised her, who taught her to fight for what she loves. Denise nodded slowly. And what about Dylan's family? You know they'll see this as a challenge. I let out a breath. Let them, I said, my voice low. If they want to fight, I'll give them one they'll never forget. The next few days passed in a blur of calls and meetings, each one a small triumph. The florist sent sketches of delicate white rose arrangements that would line the grand staircase of the Whitmore estate. The caterer promised a menu that would impress even the most jaded socialite. The musicians I'd chosen, a string quartet I'd worked with for years, confirmed they were free and eager to play. Every piece of the puzzle fell into place with a kind of inevitability that felt almost preordained. On the fourth night, as I reviewed the final draft of the invitations, elegant cream with gold lettering, I allowed myself a small moment of reflection. I thought of Emily at 16, her hair pulled back in a loose ponytail, her eyes bright as she'd asked me to teach her how to plan a party for her friends. I'd shown her every detail, from the seating chart to the color palette, delighting in her curiosity. That was the daughter I'd raised, the one who'd once wanted to know every detail of my world, who'd called me her hero. I wondered where that girl had gone. A sharp rap at the door startled me from my thoughts. I crossed the living room and opened it to find Catherine Prentice standing on my porch, her designer coat belted tightly against the chill. Her expression was guarded, but her eyes were alive with something. Fear, maybe, or curiosity. Mrs. Alexander, she said, her voice polite but cold. May I come in? I stepped aside, gesturing for her to enter. Of course, I said. Please, have a seat. She chose the wing-back chair by the fireplace, her posture immaculate. I settled into the chair opposite her, the distance between us suddenly feeling like a chasm. I understand you're planning a gala, she said carefully, her fingers laced together in her lap. I inclined my head. That's right. A fundraiser for the children's literacy program Emily used to support. Her jaw tightened, and for the first time, I saw the faintest flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. Some might see that as opportunistic. I raised an eyebrow, letting a small smile play at my lips. Some might, I agreed, but I prefer to think of it as honoring my daughter's passions, something every mother would want to do. She shifted in her seat. Emily is adjusting to her new life. This kind of event, it could complicate things. I leaned forward, my gaze steady and unwavering. Emily's life is complicated because she's trying to please everyone except herself. I won't let her forget who she is, or where she came from. Catherine's eyes flashed, a brief spark of defiance. You're making a mistake, she said, her voice trembling just enough to betray her nerves. I sat back, my smile widening. That's where you're wrong, I said softly. I've never been more certain of anything in my life. She stood abruptly, smoothing her coat with trembling fingers. I hope you know what you're doing, she said, and with that, she turned and left, leaving the door swinging open behind her. I rose, closing it gently. In the silence that followed, I felt the last of my hesitation burn away. This wasn't just about a gala. This was about reminding my daughter, and everyone else, that Grace Alexander was not a woman to be cast aside. Let them talk. I'd make sure they'd never forget me. The day before the Garden of Light Gala, I stood in the ballroom of the Whitmore estate, overseeing the final touches. Sunlight streamed through the towering windows, painting the gleaming parquet floor in patterns of gold. White roses, Emily's favorite, were everywhere, their fragrance filling the room like a promise. Every detail had been seen to. The string quartet rehearsing near the grand piano, the caterers laying out the first trays of hors d'oeuvres, the delicate lighting that would make the room glow like a fairy tale when evening fell. I had planned hundreds of events here, but this one felt different, like a line drawn in the sand. I checked my watch, noting that the staff was right on schedule. My team had always been efficient, but today they moved with the kind of reverence reserved for the most important clients. They knew this was personal. Denise arrived just after noon, her hair swept up in a chignon that gave her an air of quiet strength. She carried 2 cups of coffee and a knowing smile. "You've outdone yourself, Grace," she said, handing me a cup. "This place is magnificent." I took a sip, the warmth steadying me. "It had to be," I said. "This isn't just another event. It's a message." Denise nodded. "And Emily?" I let out a breath. "I sent her an invitation, hand-delivered by a staff member she's known since she was 12. She can't pretend she didn't see it." Denise's eyes darkened. "Do you think she'll come?" I thought of my daughter, so stubborn, so sure of herself, and felt the ache of 1,000 unspoken words between us. "I don't know," I admitted. "But whether she does or not, she'll know I'm here, and she'll know who I am." The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur of final preparations. I supervised every detail, inspecting the flower arrangements, tasting the hors d'oeuvres, ensuring the lighting crew positioned each spotlight exactly as I'd envisioned. Every element bore my mark. As the sun dipped below the horizon, guests began to arrive. The city's elite, dressed in their finest, stepped through the grand entrance and marveled at the transformation. Waiters circulated with trays of sparkling cider and champagne. The string quartet played softly, weaving a thread of elegance through the gathering. I stood near the entrance, greeting each guest with a practiced smile. Some I knew well, clients who'd become friends over the years. Others were acquaintances who'd heard of Alexander Events' reputation. Each one expressed admiration for the evening's beauty, and each compliment felt like a small victory. But with every handshake, every polite nod, I felt the absence of the one guest I truly wanted to see. An hour into the evening, as the speeches began, I felt a shift in the room. A hush rippled through the crowd, like wind over water. I turned, my breath catching. Emily stood in the doorway, her posture stiff, but her eyes searching. She wore a simple navy dress that set off her pale complexion, and her hair was swept into an elegant knot that reminded me of the girl who used to ask me to braid it before ballet class. She hesitated, her gaze moving over the flowers, the guests, the banners bearing the name of the Children's Literacy Fund. Her lips parted, as if to speak, but then she closed them, pressing them together in a thin line. I crossed the room slowly, each step deliberate, each breath measured. When I reached her, I stopped, letting the silence stretch between us like a bridge waiting to be crossed. "Emily," I said, my voice soft but strong. "I'm glad you came." She looked around, her eyes wary. "Mom, what is this?" I gestured to the room. "It's a celebration, for the cause you've always cared about, for the children who need a voice, for the family I thought we shared." Her eyes flickered, pain and confusion warring on her face. "You didn't have to do this," she whispered. A bitter laugh escaped me before I could stop it. "Didn't I?" I asked, my voice trembling. "After everything, after being shut out of your wedding like a stranger, I needed you to remember who I am, who I've always been to you." She looked down at her hands, twisting a silver bracelet around her wrist. "I didn't want it to be like that," she said, her voice breaking. I thought it would be easier for everyone if—" "Easier?" I repeated, my anger sharp but laced with sorrow. "You thought erasing me from your wedding would be easier? For whom, Emily? For them? For you?" She flinched, tears welling in her eyes. I thought Dylan's family would accept me more if—" She trailed off, her voice cracking. I felt my heart twist, the pain of it so deep I could hardly breathe. "Emily," I said, reaching for her hands, "I've spent my entire life building you up, giving you everything I never had. I gave you the tools to be strong, to stand tall, to know your worth. And yet, in the moment that mattered most, you let them convince you that you needed to hide me away." She let out a sob, a small, broken sound that shattered something inside me. "I was afraid," she whispered. "Afraid they'd judge me for where I came from, for not being good enough." I drew her hands to my chest, holding them there as if I could will the strength back into her. "Emily, you've always been enough, more than enough. And if they couldn't see that with me at your side, then they were never worthy of you to begin with." She looked up at me, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I'm sorry, Mom," she choked. "I didn't realize—" I shook my head, tears blurring my vision. "It's too late for regrets tonight, but it's not too late for tomorrow. I don't need your apology, Emily. I need you to remember who you are, and who I am." She nodded slowly, her tears falling unchecked. "I remember," she whispered. I drew her into an embrace, holding her close as the music swelled around us. In that moment, surrounded by strangers and yet more connected than I'd felt in years, I knew the battle was not yet won. But the first step had been taken. She would never erase me again. The morning after the gala felt like waking up after a storm. The house was quiet but charged with an energy I couldn't name. The echoes of laughter and music still clung to the walls, the white roses now drooping, petals scattered like forgotten confetti across the gleaming floor. I moved slowly through the house, trailing my fingers over the furniture, feeling every bit of its emptiness. Denise arrived just before noon, her steps brisk as she let herself in with the familiarity of a woman who had walked these halls more times than I could count. She found me at the kitchen table, a half-empty cup of coffee in front of me, untouched and cold. "Grace," she said softly, sliding into the chair opposite me. "You did it. You reminded everyone who you are." I let out a shaky breath, the memory of the night before rushing in like a tide. Emily's tear-streaked face, the way her hands trembled as she reached for mine, the way the entire room had seemed to hold its breath as we spoke, as if the world itself had paused to witness a moment too raw, too real to ignore. "She came," I whispered, my voice rough with emotion. "She came, Denise." Denise reached across the table, her hand warm and steady as it closed over mine. "Of course she did. She couldn't stay away forever. You're her mother, Grace. That bond is unbreakable." I shook my head, my gaze unfocused. She said she was afraid they'd judge her for where she came from, afraid of them seeing me, seeing us. Denise's lips tightened. Then she spent too much time listening to the wrong voices. A bitter laugh escaped me. "I tried to tell her that," I said. "I tried to show her that her strength doesn't come from their approval. It comes from everything I taught her, everything I gave her." Denise squeezed my hand. "And last night, you did that. You gave her a chance to see it with her own eyes." I wanted to believe her, but even now, a shadow lingered in my chest. a nagging doubt that this reconciliation was fragile, a flower that might wither in the harsh light of day. The house phone rang, startling me from my thoughts. I stared at it, the shrill sound filling the room like a dare. Denise nodded encouragingly. "Answer it," she urged. With a deep breath, I picked up the receiver. "Grace Alexander," I said, the familiar authority slipping back into my voice like an old coat. "Mom?" The word hit me like a blow. For a heartbeat, I couldn't speak. "Emily," I managed finally, my voice trembling. She sounded small, younger than she had in years. "Can we talk?" she asked, her voice raw and uncertain. I need to see you." I swallowed hard, tears threatening. "Of course," I said. "Whenever you're ready." She let out a breath that sounded like a sob. "Now," she whispered. "Please." Denise reached for my free hand, her eyes shining with pride and something deeper, a mother's knowing. I nodded to her, and she squeezed my fingers before slipping out of the room to give us privacy. "Where are you?" I asked. "Outside," Emily said. "I didn't want to just walk in. I wasn't sure if you'd want me to." A pang shot through me, sharper than any I'd felt. "Emily," I said softly, "this will always be your home. You never have to ask." When I opened the front door, she was there on the porch, her arms wrapped around herself, as if she were bracing against a wind only she could feel. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her hair pulled back in a messy ponytail that reminded me so much of her teenage years, it made my heart ache. "Hi," she said, her voice cracking. "Hi," I echoed, and for a moment we simply stared at each other, all the words caught in the space between us. Finally, she stepped forward and fell into my arms, her body trembling with sobs that shook us both. I held her close, burying my face in her hair, the scent of her shampoo, lavender and honey, flooding my senses with memories. "I'm sorry," she cried, her voice muffled against my shoulder. "I'm so sorry, Mom. I didn't mean to hurt you. I got so caught up in their world, in their expectations. I thought I had to fit in, that I had to be someone they'd accept." Tears slid down my cheeks as I pulled back just enough to see her face. "Oh, baby," I whispered, brushing a strand of hair from her cheek. "You never needed their acceptance. You've always been enough, more than enough. I wish you'd known that." She nodded, her eyes glistening with regret. "I know that now," she said. "Last night, it was like I was seeing you for the first time, seeing everything you've built, everything you've done. I was so proud of you, Mom, and so ashamed of myself." I shook my head. "No, sweetheart. Don't be ashamed. We all make mistakes. What matters is that we learn from them, and that we find our way back to the people who love us." She leaned into me, her forehead resting against mine. "Can I come home?" she asked, her voice so small it broke me. I pulled her close, pressing a kiss to her temple. "You never left," I whispered. We stood like that for a long time, the world falling away around us. Finally, she stepped back, her eyes searching mine. "I need to tell you something," she said. "Dylan's mother, she tried to keep you away from the wedding. She said you'd make a scene, that you'd embarrass me. And I let her get into my head. But she was wrong. You're the strongest woman I know, and I should have stood up for you." Rage flickered through me, but I pushed it down. "That's over now," I said. "You know the truth, and that's all that matters." She nodded, wiping her tears. "I want to make things right, Mom. I want to make sure everyone knows how much I love you, how much you mean to me." I smiled through my tears, pride swelling in my chest. "Then let's do that." I said. Together. And as we stood on the porch, the sun breaking through the clouds overhead, I felt the first fragile threads of healing begin to weave between us. We would face the world together, mother and daughter, stronger than any lie, any betrayal. Because in the end, love is the one thing that cannot be erased. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the living room floor as I set the final teacup on the coffee table. Emily was coming over, and I'd arranged everything just so, like I used to when she was little, and I wanted to make her feel special. A plate of her favorite lemon shortbread cookies sat beside the teapot, the smell of vanilla and butter filling the air. It felt surreal, this act of hospitality after all the tension that had clouded the past months. But I needed her to know that, no matter what had happened, this was still her home, and I was still her mother. I moved to the window and watched the street, half hoping to see her car pulling up, half dreading the conversation that lay ahead. The memory of her tear-streaked face on the porch the day before still haunted me, the desperation in her voice, the vulnerability in her eyes. She had always been strong-willed, my Emily. Even as a child, she'd fought for every inch of her independence. I'd admired that, even when it made our relationship difficult. But the price of that strength had been her willingness to believe she had to fight her own battles alone. Now, as I waited, I wondered how many of those battles she'd fought against me without my even realizing it. The sound of a car door slamming pulled me from my thoughts. I turned to see Emily walking up the path, her steps slow, hesitant. She wore a simple cream blouse and jeans, no designer labels, no carefully curated accessories. Just Emily, the girl I'd raised, her hair loose around her shoulders. I opened the door before she could knock. "Hi," she said, her voice small. "Hi," I replied, my heart aching at the uncertainty in her eyes. "Come in." She stepped past me, her gaze flicking around the familiar room as if seeing it for the first time. Her fingers trailed over the back of the sofa, the same sofa she'd sprawled across for movie nights and long talks about everything and nothing. I gestured to the table. "I made tea and lemon shortbread." She smiled, a sad, grateful smile that reminded me so much of her as a child. "Thank you," she said, her voice catching. We settled into the chairs by the window, the late afternoon light turning her hair to gold. For a moment, we sat in silence, the air thick with things unsaid. Finally, she reached for the teacup, her hands trembling slightly. "Mom," she began, her voice faltering, "I know I can't take back what I did. I know I hurt you, and I can't tell you how sorry I am. I let other people's opinions mean more than yours, and I hate that I let that happen." Tears blurred my vision as I reached across the table and took her hand. "Emily, I've spent my whole life teaching you to be strong, to stand up for yourself. But somewhere along the way, I forgot to teach you that it's okay to lean on the people who love you." She let out a shaky breath, her tears falling freely now. "I thought I had to prove I could do it on my own," she whispered. "That I didn't need anyone. But all I've done is push you away." I squeezed her hand, my own tears slipping down my cheeks. "You've always been enough, Emily," I said. "More than enough. I just wish you'd seen that sooner." She let out a soft sob, and I moved to sit beside her, wrapping my arms around her. She buried her face in my shoulder, and for a moment, we were mother and daughter again. No barriers, no betrayals, just two women finding their way back to each other. When she pulled back, her eyes were red, but determined. "I want to make things right," she said. "I want people to know how wrong I was, how much you mean to me." I shook my head gently. "It's not about what other people think," I said. "It's about us. About you and me finding a way to heal." She nodded, wiping her tears. "I know. but I also know that Dylan's family has tried to paint you as something you're not. I let them do that. And I need to set the record straight." Anger flared in my chest at the thought of that woman, with her cold smile and her whispered lies. "You don't owe them anything," I said. "But if you want to tell them the truth, I'll stand by you." She took a deep breath, her hands twisting in her lap. "I want to, Mom. I want them to know that you're the reason I am who I am, that everything good in me comes from you." I pulled her close again, pressing my lips to her hair. "You have no idea how much that means to me," I whispered. For a long time we sat like that, the sun dipping lower in the sky, the room bathed in a soft golden light. Finally, Emily pulled back, her expression resolute. "I'm going to talk to Dylan," she said. "I'm going to tell him everything. About you, about the way his family treated you, about how I let them influence me." I felt a pang of worry. "Are you sure?" I asked. "I don't want you to feel like you have to choose between him and me." She shook her head, her eyes fierce. "I'm not choosing," she said. "I'm setting boundaries. If he can't accept that, then maybe he's not the man I thought he was." Pride swelled in my chest, mingled with sorrow for the pain I knew she was about to face. "I'll be here," I said, "no matter what happens." She reached for my hand again, squeezing it tight. "I know, Mom," she said, her voice steady. "And that's what gives me the strength to do this." As the last rays of sunlight faded from the room, I realized that Emily had found something even more powerful than forgiveness. She'd found her own voice, and she was finally ready to use it. And I knew, no matter what came next, we would face it together. The evening after Emily's confession, I sat in the living room, the glow of the lamp casting a soft halo over the old photographs on the mantel. The house felt alive again, the silence no longer a chasm, but a comforting hush that held the echoes of laughter and tears. Emily arrived just after dinner, her steps light but purposeful. She held a small overnight bag, her expression determined. "Mom," she said, setting the bag by the door, "I need to talk to Dylan. And I need you there with me." My heart clenched. "Are you sure?" I asked. "You don't owe him." She shook her head, tears brimming but unfallen. "I owe it to myself, and to you. He needs to hear the truth, from both of us." I nodded, rising to my feet. "Then let's do it together." At Dylan's house, his mother's front garden was immaculate, each flower bed perfectly manicured, a place that felt more like a stage than a home. Dylan met us at the door, his expression taut with confusion and worry. "Emily," he said, glancing at me, his voice low. "I didn't expect—" She stepped forward, her chin high. "Dylan, we need to talk. About everything." He gestured us inside, the house hushed as if holding its breath. Dylan's mother, Catherine, sat stiffly on the edge of a pristine sofa, her lips pressed into a thin line. She looked at me, her eyes cold, but said nothing. Emily stood in the center of the room, her voice trembling but strong. "Dylan, I love you. But I can't start a marriage built on lies and half-truths. I let your mother convince me that my mother was an embarrassment, that she would ruin our day. I believed her when she said my mother wasn't worthy of being at my wedding." Dylan's eyes widened, his jaw clenching. "Emily." She held up a hand. "No, let me finish," she said, her voice breaking. "Mom was the one who taught me everything, how to be strong, how to believe in myself, how to stand tall when the world tries to push you down. She built her business from nothing. She made me who I am. And I let all of you—" She shot a hard look at Catherine. "Convince me that she didn't belong at my wedding. I'll regret that for the rest of my life." Catherine's lips parted, but no words came. Dylan's gaze swung to me, guilt etched in every line of his face. "Mrs. Alexander," he said, his voice hoarse. "I'm sorry. I didn't know what my mother was saying. I thought it was best for Emily to keep the peace." I met his gaze, my voice calm, but edged with steel. "You didn't think at all," I said. "You let fear guide you. You let her believe she had to choose between her family and yours. And in doing so, you took the most important day of her life and made it a place I wasn't welcome." He swallowed hard, shame flushing his cheeks. "I was wrong," he whispered, "and I'm so sorry." Catherine shifted uncomfortably, her eyes darting to her son and then back to me. "Grace," she began, her voice brittle. I raised a hand, silencing her. "Don't," I said softly. "You taught Emily that appearances mattered more than love, that status mattered more than loyalty. But Emily and we're stronger than that." Tears welled in Emily's eyes as she turned to her mother-in-law. "You owe my mother an apology," she said fiercely. "You owe her the respect she's always deserved." For a long moment, Dylan's mom sat silent, her pride a fortress around her. Then slowly, she stood. "Grace," she said, her voice trembling, "I'm sorry. I let my own insecurities guide me, and I hurt you and Emily. I was wrong." I nodded, my chest tight. "Thank you," I said simply. Emily turned to Dylan, her hand finding his. "I want to renew our vows," she said, "with Mom by my side, with her as my witness, my guide, my mother, because she deserves to be there, because she's always been there." Dylan nodded, his eyes shining. "Of course," he whispered. "Anything you want." Emily turned to me then, her smile radiant through her tears. "Mom," she said, her voice strong, "when I told you to watch it online, I didn't understand what I was saying. You didn't just watch. You made me watch. You made me see you, see us, see everything you've always been to me." I stepped forward, wrapping her in my arms, my tears falling freely now. "I made you watch," I whispered, "because I wanted you to remember that a mother's love can't be erased. It can't be uninvited." And as I held her, I knew this was the ending I had fought for, not an invitation, but an unbreakable bond. She had tried to shut me out, but I had made her see me, made her watch, and made her remember who she really was. Thank you for watching. If you've ever been underestimated by someone you love, comment "still standing" to show your strength. To hear more stories of hope and resilience, click on the left, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Stay strong and keep going.